Hey band, choir, and orchestra directors, it's Jill, and we're continuing our Teaching the Ballot for Contest or Festival series. And today I'm going to be talking about a very special category for, depending on your ensemble, diction, bowing, or articulation. Just like our studies on all these other ballot categories, I start this discussion in my classroom by gauging what the students think that this means versus what it actually means in the context of being adjudicated at a festival. Then we spend a full week or sometimes more really focusing hard in class on cleaning up those dictions or those articulations or those bowings. And today I'm going to talk about a few things that I focus on with students of different levels. Obviously, this is a little different depending on your ensemble, so bear with me as I kind of cover each one. So for beginners in a band setting, this would look like having clear attacks on the beginning of your notes, not ha-ha-haing or slap tonguing, but a clear t at the beginning of notes, and then also some basic articulation such as tonguing, slurring, and that kind of thing. Then on the other side for orchestra, this would look like having a good bow hold, as well as things like appropriate pressure, where your bow is hitting on the string, and of course some basic styles like détaché and slurring as well. Then for beginner choir students, of course, you're going to focus on basic vowel shapes and tongue position, thinking about getting those tall vowels and then starting and ending notes together as a group as well. Now, as you get into intermediate and advanced groups, your judges are going to be looking for more finesse in your articulation, more types of articulations, and things like group application. So making sure that everyone is accenting and weighting notes together, and note lengths. For example, on staccatos, we want everyone to have kind of that same concept of half of the value of the note. Same thing for advancing orchestras. They're going to be looking for application of more styles like spiccato, and then they're going to be looking for kind of matching styles among the sections, matching articulations there, as well as thinking about reduction in excessive motion among your sections with those bowings. For advancing choirs, judges can get pretty nitpicky, and so you want to be thinking about things like shortening your consonants, especially S sounds, shortening those up so they're not dragging along. And then be thinking about your pronunciation application in your music. So for a lot of choral music, there's kind of a correct pronunciation of vowels. This does not apply to stylistic music. Say things might be different in a spiritual, for example, but for general overall choral pronunciation, you want to be aware of, number one, regional accents. Personally, I'm from the Midwest. I know it's hard to tell. But in our region, we tend to turn words like for into fur. I went to town for a gallon of milk. And so we want to be aware of those when we're singing so that we can correct our pronunciation. Likewise, a lot of American accents turn things like double T's into double D's. So if I'm saying something like bittersweet, I say bitter instead of bitter. And we want to be very clear with our diction when we're talking about choral pronunciation. Then for groups of all types, particularly if you're working with percussion, this is obviously very common for band, but for orchestra or choral groups who are working with percussion instruments as well for a festival work, you want to be very conscious of how that percussion is adding to the articulation of your ensemble. Often composers are writing with a certain idea of how that percussion part is going to contribute to the sound of the ensemble, and because of the nature of percussion instruments, a lot of those sounds are right at the beginning of the note when that articulation or diction would be happening. So this is a great time to really consider mallet selection for instruments like timpani or keyboard instruments, and experiment if needed. If you find that you're not quite getting the right articulation on the beginning of the note, unless there's something very specifically stated, it's a good time to experiment and see what sounds best. Articulation, diction, and bowing can be a very easy thing to forget about when you're in the midst of trying to correct notes and rhythms and dynamics in rehearsal. And so this is a really good one to record your group, video and audio if you can, and then view it later with the sole lens of looking for issues with articulation, bowing, or diction, because they'll become very apparent when you're not focusing on anything else. And one final tip, if you are working on any articulations, bowings, or dictions in your literature that are new to your group or unusual for your group or are kind of specialty skills, then I highly recommend finding a warm-up or a drill to include daily that includes those, or write one for your group. Because even then, on days when your group is not getting that skill through the literature, particularly if it's only in spots, then your group will still get that repetition and reteaching when they're trying to master a new skill. That's it for today's tip on articulation, bowing, and diction. So make sure you give us a like and a follow so that you can come back next week when I'm going to be talking about musicianship and interpretation. Catch you next time.